Yo, team. I've been super looking forward to this catch up. I can't wait to dive into this, Suzy. So firstly, before we dive into it, Suzy here is from BDO. She's been an amazing part of both my journey here locally and also nationally and internationally overseas in the US. But today we get to dive into an amazing topic, which it's so close to my heart because we've been working with these generational change business for a long time. So firstly, before we dive into it, can you please introduce yourself and then we'll get started?
Thanks, Lucas. So Suzy Munt, I am the National Lead Partner for Family Enterprise Services here at BDO. And we look after family businesses or families in business, which is why we call it Family Enterprise Services, because it's not just about businesses, it's about all of their enterprising journeys and wealth and investments that they have. So we help them with anything from succession to their business growth and their journey, maintaining relationships and helping them with their business governance.
And then exiting and going on to the next stage of life.
Exiting, everything in between.
Everything in between. And so you're the national lead, which means you essentially lead the entire family business, or it used to be Family Business Services, Family Enterprise Services across Australia.
Yes.
Let's dive into that quickly. One, why is this so close to your heart? And then two, how did you become the national lead in this environment?
So it's so close to my heart. My family have had businesses throughout my entire life. And so being so close to watching relationships and how they can be impacted by business decisions, and clients of mine as well, and the community and people who work in this space, who work in families, that work with their families, they're just a different type of person. Like, you know, there's a real passion and humanity and family connection that I just love working with those types of people. And I became the national lead. I've been working here at BDO almost 20 years. I started as a graduate almost
We're at the BDO head office right now.
20 years ago.
See behind us.
And just working with some really great inspiring mentors of mine. So Susan Reeks, Bruce Hatcher, they've been working in this space for a long time, and just starting to work with family clients in that space. And, you know, that's how I developed my career, working with them. When Susan stepped down as national lead and as a partner a few years ago, I was the natural successor. So we practice our own succession plan here at BDO.
Love it.
And so I stepped into that role. So leading the team nationally, we have offices all around Australia with specialists who work in this space.
Yeah, love it. And so before we dive into it, I want to get really clear on this conversation. What is family enterprises and what does it mean to the people that you work with on a daily basis?
So family enterprises, as I said before, is mostly around families who are in business together. So it doesn't necessarily mean the manufacturing plant or the fish and chip shop or things like that. It's also about working in business together around their wealth or their investments,
so very
their
people
portfolio,
focused.
Very people focused. So family enterprises and people working with their families, and those who are potentially listening right now around, you know, they work with their siblings. It's a very different relationship that they have, because in a family business or family enterprise, you've got 7 different types of people within that, because they're wearing different hats. So they can be a family member, they can be a manager of the business, they can be an owner, or a combination of those 3. And depending on what hat they're wearing, they've got different priorities and different expectations of what decision they're making or what their priorities are. And
it could be mother, father, kids, grandkids, cousins, siblings, all aspects.
I mean, you're a family and you're working with your family, but you've got your own family. So what's important to you and your family is different to your siblings' family. And so when you start having different priorities, but you're working together and trying to build a legacy or build a future for the next generation, you can potentially butt heads with each other or have different ways of making decisions. You've got different upbringings, or you've got different ways, especially when it starts getting down from the sibling partnership into cousin consortiums that we call it. You know, it's really important to be able to have those conversations and get the family on the same page so that you're working together for that future legacy.
And no doubt you've seen this, because I've seen this as well. Like, the water gets very muddled between, you've physically said, and this is why it's close to my heart, because we work with family businesses for 20 years. And you see the dynamics in their business where family members can literally just shout across the entire room and just yell at each other and just go absolute nuts. And then all the employees are just sitting around and just like continuing doing their own thing. Like, this is just normal. employees don't do that.
No.
But family members just seem to like just becomes normal in the culture.
Becomes normal, but doesn't necessarily mean it should be normal either, because that can cause some negative impacts on the employees who work in the business. And are you creating that right, business environment for everyone? So again, going back to having governance in the business, and how do you make, are you having family arguments in the business that's causing some impacts and confusion amongst employees and things like that?
And that's the idea. And that's the reason for us to talk about this today, because we work with loads of family businesses. We see this on a daily basis, like how we put the right structure in place to allow the legacy to live on. I guess that's where I am coming from. Where are you coming from?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, families, you think about an ASX listed company. A CEO in an ASX listed company generally has a tenure of 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 years if they're lucky. So they don't have that long-term vision, whereas families, they're in it for the long haul. Some families have 1,000-year strategies because it's about their legacy and their custodianship of the business or the wealth for the future generations. So it's really about defining that
literally
legacy.
A 1,000-year strategy.
Yeah, there's a company that has a 1,000-year strategy.
Interesting.
And so it's about having that future looking, and that's why they work so differently to your ASX listed companies, because they can make decisions quickly. They can make decisions around the dinner table, or they don't have to wait till next month's shareholder meeting to be able to make a big decision, for example. So having that long range thinking and the ability to be quick on their feet and know how each other operate, it's their secret sauce as a family to be able to do that.
That's super interesting when you if I think about the ASX listed 3 to 5 years, government 4-year tender. This is family is no, what's our 30-year plan, 50-year plan, 1,000-year plan? That's it's a completely different mindset, a different way of thinking. What I want to dive into today, and because I know what's coming, the next 3 to 5 years, 10 years, the coming years, this whole baby boomer generation, we're already seeing it. The owner, the original owner, or the second or third generation owner, they're in their 60s, 70s, maybe even 80s. They're about to retire. What I'm actually seeing on the ground, and I'm not sure what you're seeing here, Suze, is some of the kids that are being handed the business actually don't even want to take the business over because they don't want to deal with the political BS, let's call it, that the past has given them, or because their child will bring up, or whatever it might be. What are you seeing on the ground here? This is super common over the next 3 to 5 years.
Absolutely super. There's so much trillions of dollars of wealth that's going to be transitioned and businesses to the next generation. And there's so many different reasons why those transitions are failing and not going to the next generation. So some of those are that the next generation are just not interested. They've got their own degrees. It's much more common for everyone to go to uni, or for a lot of people to go to uni and go and have their own careers. It's very common for blended families to be involved as well. And so it starts getting a bit trickier and muddier as to, well, who is going to actually take over the business in the next generation? And it can start the conversations too difficult. So people put their head in the sand and go, no, I just can't deal with that. I'll just sell the business. The next generation, often they don't have that same upbringing as the baby boomers of the day. They might not have seen the ups and downs and trials and tribulations that their parents have gone through in the business, so they might expect that things will just pan out the way that they always have. But they need maybe some education, or they might not understand the legal requirements or the risk that's involved in running a business or being a director of a business. And sometimes that might be just too hard. They're like, well, I want to go and do my own thing.
Especially if they've gone the career focus and become a doctor, but it's in a manufacturing plant. It's it's completely chalk and cheese, right? So
yeah.
I feel like that the original, say if it's third generation or second generation business, the people who took over the company 20, 30, 40 years ago, that was just, you didn't really have a choice. It was you just got to do it. You just got to take it over and just run with it. And I don't care if you've got a background in interior design. It's you're now running this organization. But what you're seeing is the newer generation have choice.
Yeah.
And I guess they're sticking up for themselves and going, well, no, I don't want to take it over.
It's also that we find a lot that the outgoing generation sometimes find it difficult to let go. They've turned up to this business every day. A lot of the times it's the business that they've created. They turn up there every single day, 6-7 days a week. It's their baby, it's their legacy, it's what they know best. So it's really hard for them to let go of that business, and that can then be hard for the next generation to take over from. That, you know, they've got these big shoes to fill, and either they feel like they're going to fail, or they don't feel like their parents have faith that they can actually do it. We often see that, you know, they want to hand over the business and they want to take over the business, but they can't make decisions in the business because mum and dad are still hanging around, or, you know, might come over the top of them.
So often.
They often have very different views about how the business should run. You know, we see older generations, they might stick to doing the same thing we've always done. But, you know, we're becoming much more entrepreneurial now. So let's try new things, do it a different way. And that can cause some tension between the outgoing generation and incoming generation. And when that tension comes and they're not getting on the same page about those issues, or being able to develop a plan of how that transition might work, then it can fail, and the kids can go, well, I've had enough, I'll walk out. Or they get to a stage where they're, you know, not handing over the business till they're 80 or something to the next generation. They're in their 60s. They're like, well, I'm ready to retire. Like, maybe look at your grandkids or something. So it's really about getting that done early, getting it done in time when everyone's on the same, you know, getting along, everyone's on the same page, and being able to put in a plan.
It's super interesting, right? Because if you think about the newer generation wanting to take over a company, they have new ideas. The new technology's changed ridiculous amount. And look at AI in the last 2 years. I'm assuming, because I see it, but you're assuming from your point of view, the original generation, let's call it, is there a name for that? The previous generation?
The outgoing generation.
The outgoing generation. They haven't stayed up to date with what's happening in the change, especially from a tech point of view. And they're like, let's just do it how we've always done it. New generation comes in, wants to do it completely different. And that would cause conflict, right?
Yep.
New markets, new products, new ways of doing things. And so it's not until that person officially lets go. And I've seen this in companies where the second or third generation, whoever it might be, hands down the company to the typically son or daughter, goes, you are the CEO, you're now running the company, but they still come to work and they still come to the office every day. And the employees are like, well, so who do I go to? Do I go to this person, or do I go to this person? Who makes the decision?
Yeah, that can cause a lot of confusion. And, you know, that sometimes it's not about the fact that you're on different pages or you want different things. It's about just understanding each other and where you're coming from. So the outgoing generation, you know, they've gone through tough times. They've seen rock bottom. The kids might not have seen that. And so they're trying to protect their wealth and their legacy. They want it for future generations. So they see the risk as going, well, I don't want to lose it all. I don't want to bet the whole farm. So you're actually just needing to of our profits each year to a new venture. How do we make sure that this is an enterprise that we can be the environment or whatever it is? Let's define that legacy and that purpose as a family, and then set up a plan so that you can all be on the same page about how that might work. And it's about compromise, really, and how you're going to do it.
Allowing them to let go because of the structure, compliance, governance in place that gives them the strength to go, okay, now I know it's in good hands.
Yep.
That's essentially where you come in.
And that's a really good point that you make. Are we in good hands? It's actually something that a lot of people ask. And when you talk to bankers in particular, that's one question they are very, very keen on knowing. Are we in good hands? Is the business in good hands? When that transition is going through and the business needs some funding for a growth project or something, they want to know that the next generation is actually going to have a good governance in place and have the business in good hands. And if you don't have a plan in place, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to get the bank on board, particularly if mum or dad are retiring.
You can't just go to the bank and say, I want $5 million. It's like, no, where's your structure? Where's your roadmap? Where's your plan? Yeah, interesting. It makes sense, because they've had their relationship with a particular person in the company for 20 or 30 years, and they trust them because they've always made good on whatever they're trying to make good on. Yeah.
Their relationship is with mum and dad.
I don't know who you are. Yeah,
exactly.
Wow.
And an interesting stat, just talking about advisors, is there's so many advisors who don't make a connection with their clients' children, the next generation, and 66% of children who take over their family business change advisors when they get the wealth.
This is
the
accountants, lawyers. It sounds like bankers.
Yep, because they don't want the same as what mum and dad have. They want their own advice. They want their own.
They want to
do it their own way. And so, as advisors, if there's any lawyers or accountants listening, it's really about building that relationship with the next generation as well.
But I can imagine if you've got a relationship and you've spent 30 years building that relationship, like, oh, I've got to start again. Now I've got to build a relationship with a new person. And I could understand if they've been around for a long time, that wouldn't be easy.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Hey?
And it's also one of the reasons why we often get called in doing these assignments with families in that transition plan is because we are external and we're not mum and dad's advisors. We're not biased. And when we do these assignments, we do it for the family as a whole. We don't do it for one particular person because we are not on anyone's side. We're on the side of the family to get on the same page.
Do you work for, this is a side note question, do you work for the business or do you work for the family? Like when you come in as this independent, like what's your
we work for the family.
The family?
The family as a whole.
Your goal is to make this whole new structure work effectively.
Yeah, so it's a focus on the family and their enterprises, which may include businesses as well as wealth and other
property
assets
and
properties
shares and everything.
Yeah, so it's about how does the family make decisions together? How do they? What's their vision? What's their mission? What's their values? How are they going to operate together? How are they going to make decisions? And then when we're talking about a business side of things, who can work in the business? Who is a family member? We've had discussions and heated discussions with family over the actual definition of who is a family member. Does it include adopted children? And what's the definition of adopted children?
Wow.
When you go to some cultures, they don't necessarily legally adopt children, but they might informally adopt children. So are they included or excluded from the family, and can they own shares in the future? So it's thinking about all those things that you might not think about in a succession plan or in the future to be able to get on the same page together.
I dare say you'd probably see it where, Christmas, I talk about Christmas, but essentially Christmas parties happen, family get-togethers, and they have a massive big argument about something, and then next minute they're like, no, I don't want that person ever being in my business ever. Do you see that type of stuff?
Yeah, and I mean, most of the time it just comes down to communication.
Yeah.
We all communicate differently. It's no different with families, and it's not someone's right and someone's wrong. It's just understanding each other and being able to put your best argument forward for certain decisions. But how do you actually do that? We find the next generation might not have any experience in making decisions or putting business cases forward for a business plan or opening up a business or something like that. So we might be able to help them with some mock meetings or help them preparation, some financial education around, how do I read a balance sheet? How do I know what questions I need to ask when I'm, when you've got to make these decisions around this wealth?
I guess building the trust, right? That new person coming in has to build the trust with everyone.
Yeah.
I'm going to dive into some stats here because I think it's super interesting, especially for listeners out there. 93% intend to transfer the business to family members. 93% of businesses intend to transfer. So that's a big stat. Is that the current generation who's running the company? They believe and they think the next generation are 100%, 93% going to take over the company.
Yep. Well, all their wealth, their wealth and their business to the next generation.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But then the other stat is only 39% actually have a succession plan in place.
Yeah.
Which means they've got this in their mind. 93% is a high number. It's 100% happening, let's call it. But there's no plan on how that happens. And they go, well, there's no agreements. I'm guessing there's no legal agreements. There's no roadmaps and financial forecasts. And it's just like, here it is. Good luck. See you later.
Well, I think most of the time when we ask, does everyone know in the family know what your plans are? Yeah. Everyone knows my plan. But okay, so if they know your plan, and then you ask the next generation, so do you know what your dad's plan is, your mum's plan? Yeah, no idea. I have no idea what's going to happen. Oh, that's news to me. And
it's all up here,
it's
right?
all up in the head, and that knowledge transfer, not only of the business, but how to do things is vitally important. But just having the open communication about this is what's going to happen. Assumptions are absolutely the devil. Like I cannot emphasize how much assumptions are just, you just shouldn't make any assumptions.
It's got to be written.
It's got to be, and you've got to have those conversations. If you don't have the conversations, and you've got to be clear in the conversation, you can't just say, oh yeah, this will be yours one day.
Where my mind goes is like creating an AI knowledge base, where essentially let's take the original owner or second generation and like just download their entire brain into an AI agent.
Nice.
Yeah,
be nice
it's
if we could do it.
possible. As long as that person's willing to cooperate. But yes, we can. What's the last stat here? 21% of family businesses have never been valued. 21%. So let's talk about evaluation when it comes to these family businesses.
Well, I mean, it's really important to know what your business is valued at, particularly if you're doing that estate plan and you're, what if you've got some children who are going to take over the business, but you've got other children who aren't interested. Are they going to then become owners of the business that their sibling works in? And how's that going to operate if they're owners and the other siblings owner and manager? How does that going to work, and how are they going to make decisions together? Is it just all going to fall apart? So having that valuation of the business and a plan of being able to equalize or
be on the same page.
And have that plan in place for your estate planning.
Sometimes that some people think like it's worth $100,000, but the other person goes, well, no, it's worth $500,000. Is there a big discrepancy?
100%. Yeah, there's always a lot of discrepancy with that. Or mum and dad might think it's worth X, and the kids are like, well, I've built all this wealth actually working in the business. I've actually developed all of this. So I've built the wealth, so therefore I shouldn't have to pay that much.
Yeah.
And
I just slogged my guts off for 10 years and I built up the company by millions of dollars. Why do I have to pay what you originally think it's worth?
Yeah. Or they don't even think they have to pay for it. Well, how's mum and dad going to retire?
Yeah.
What are they just going to live in your backyard?
No conversations have happened.
No conversations have happened, or they don't understand, what other assets or wealth that mum and dad have for their retirement. So maybe they're not letting go because the business is actually their superannuation. They put everything into this business. They need to sell it or realize something to be able to go and have a holiday or go and have a retirement plan. So how do you put in a plan in place, and how does that work? So again, that might involve getting some finance from the bank or some vendor financing, and then some plans around how that actually gets repaid to mum and dad.
Do you think and this is not picking on the generation that's handing over the companies, but do you think it's because finances and money is not really spoken about between family members?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's a difficult conversation, and there are some generations that just don't want to talk about money because it's always been a protected thing. It's always been a secret thing.
This will be hard,
and it's a hard conversation. It's not easy to have, and being able to put in those plans and have the conversations is vitally important, because I can tell you it's going to happen whether you're here or you're not. When you're not, it's probably going to end up in more of an argument if you don't put these plans in place. The only person who wins there is the lawyers. They're going to end up with your money, not your kids, which is very sad.
So start the conversation now. The last point is around this business structural governance. We already touched on it. 70% of businesses don't have this structure in place. This is what you're here for. Please tell the audience, tell everyone, what do you do? You've already heard why you do it, why you need to make this happen. What is the process you go through to make sure this is done in a way that is not very anxious? I can feel the tension already, right? So how do you go through this to make sure this can be done in a way that doesn't, disrupt their family culture?
Yeah. So
is that even possible?
Yeah. Well, we have a process that we undertake. It's not a cookie cutter approach because every family that we work with is different. But we go through a process, firstly, getting the entire family on board. If one person's not on board, we don't do the process, because it's vitally important that everyone's on board with the process and know what the outcomes are that we're trying to achieve.
Like your engagement, like to get you in before you even start, every family member has to decide we 100% want this.
100% in.
It's a good whole qualification process.
And everyone has to be on board, because if someone's not on board, you're going to get to the end of the process and then they're going to throw their hands in the air and go, well, I wasn't part of it. I wasn't being able to, have my input. So I'm not going to sign up to what you've decided or how you've decided to go forward. So that's number one. We also help them define what their legacy is. What is their legacy? What's their purpose? And help them do that. We then meet with every family member individually. So that's a confidential interview that we have with everyone.
One-on-one, separate room, no one knows about it.
Completely separate, mum and dad separate, everyone separate. We have about 100 questions that we ask, and we go through a very detailed process.
It's like hours.
Yep, it's a very long, lengthy process, but it's really great in that it gives us so much information to be able to move forward, and we understand where everyone's coming from. And
this helps you, I guess, compile the plan, right? Because you've got independent information from every single person. You go, oh, now I can see where all this is coming from. Yeah, makes sense.
Then we draft either a family charter is a document that a lot of families might have. So a family charter is effectively a document that documents this plan, you know, what their values are, what their mission, and who can work in the business, who can have shares, how they're going to communicate, how they're going to operate, how they're going to meet, what's their management philosophy, whole range of different things. So we set that out in based on the interview process as well as from best practice.
This makes sense because this will solve all the arguments in a room. Because if people haven't articulated this in a way, then it's like, think about this boardroom. It's like everyone just yelling at each other, trying to get their word across. So I like this process.
So once we draft that, we send that out to the family members so that they can then get their own thoughts on the process. Then we'll meet with them. We'll have a family meeting, which might last 1 or 2 days, depending on.
Hold on, not 1 or 2 hours.
1 or 2 days.
1 or 2 days.
1 or 2 days.
A meeting.
Okay. Family meeting or family retreat, sometimes we like to call it. And it could be away. We often try and encourage the family to go away. And that's time that the family needs to spend together to go through this document word for word and come to a consensus on all of those issues. And we'll also...
this would open up a can of worms.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of can of worms. We'll call them the elephants in the room.
Okay.
And I actually have a little elephant that I bring to my meetings and I flunk it on the table.
So you make it a joke at the same time it's real.
But it's also being lighthearted and being able to have those discussions. So as I said, every family is different. So these 2 days are very different depending on what's come out of the interviews and what the purpose of what we're trying to achieve for the family is. But they could range from, we typically do the family charter, and we will sometimes do mock family meetings. Maybe we'll do some communication exercises with the family. We can do disc profiling and things like that to help the family communicate together better. We might do some strategy for the business if that's required. We might get some external people to come in and talk about HR or something like that if that's needed.
Legal, accounting, anything that the business needs. Yeah, interesting.
And then if they're having a specific issue around, well, who's going to take over, or you know, they're having a particular issue within the family, we can have that as a facilitated discussion around the table.
Are you trying to build the new org chart at the same time, or does that come later?
That kind of comes later. So once we've done that 2-day process, we then set up a to-do. What are the action items from this meeting that the family are going to commit to, and to who's responsible for it, and when are they going to do it by?
The family, I have to ask this. So by the end of the 2 days, we're not handing over the business at that point to the next generation. This is just setting a plan and structure in place, because I'm guessing sometimes it could be 2 or 3 years later, it could be 5 years later.
Yeah.
There's a process that the whole company needs to go through.
Yeah. Okay. It's about setting up that plan in place, and it's not a set and forget. It's a document that's living, breathing, that the family should then come and revisit
every quarter,
every family meeting, or once a year. Again, it depends on the family and how much governance they need. So when I talk about governance, most people know corporate governance, which is, a board of directors and having your company constitution and your organizational structure and policies and procedures and things like that in place in the business. This is about family governance. So this is putting in the family charter, the rules of engagement for the family, how they work together, how they operate,
how they communicate with each other.
But they could also have what we call a family council, which is kind of like a board meeting, but for the family. So it's dealing with those family issues. So again, separating the family issues from the business and ensuring that the business issues don't impact on the family and the family issues don't impact on the business.
So putting that line in the sand, that's work, this is family.
Church and state.
Love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how do we, thank you for this. This has been amazing. I love it. So I won't steal your time for much longer. It's already been half an hour. It's been a great half an hour conversation. Thank you for this. This was meant to be like 7 minutes. So I really appreciate it. Why? Okay, we understand why. How do we stop these businesses slipping away and like literally disappearing into the thin air, or being closed down, not being able to be sold properly because of the valuations not there, being sold off to somewhere else? The legacy. How do we keep the legacy in place? That's the word I'm looking for. Because most business owners that I know, and I've worked with the last 20 years, want their legacy to continue forever, or at least the second and third generation, right? So what do we need to put in place today for the people listening to make sure that legacy doesn't disappear?
It's putting a plan in place now. It's not going, it'll all just work out, not putting your head in the sand, not just going, she'll be right. It's about putting in a plan in place now, particularly when everyone's getting along, everyone, likes each other.
Because it hasn't come to that point yet.
It hasn't come to that point yet. I mean, most of the work that we do comes to us in a crisis. Dad's had a stroke. Oh, shit. What are we going to do now? Sorry. It's about putting that plan in place
before something
happens. It's like an insurance policy. You don't go and get an insurance policy after a fire's ripped through.
Yeah.
You put it in place in case a fire rips through.
And you do it now while everyone's talking, happy, jovial, getting along in the business. You do it at the positive end, not when, oh shit, something's happened.
Yeah.
Now we have to quickly sort this out. Yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah.
Putting a plan in place now. It's an insurance policy, and it's it's done then. And every assignment that I've worked with families, they're better off for it. They communicate better. They are thankful that they have that communication and the ability to be able to communicate with each other and know where each other are coming from.
This would make the actual family relationship at Christmas time, let's pick on Christmas, would actually be a good conversation rather than, I really don't want to go to Christmas. I don't want to have that conversation about X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
This has been awesome, Suzy. I really do appreciate it.
No,
so you've heard it here first. If you don't want to let your legacy slip away, please, please, please contact Suzy today. Get this family charter set up. Get this, just start this conversation. Open this conversation up. If you're a second, third, fourth, fifth generation business, if you want your legacy to live on, please, please, please reach out. From the bottom of my heart, I do thank you very much for this, because I do want to see this business live on for a long time.
Thanks, Lucas. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Cheers.